Welcome to Your Healthy Kitchen from YRMC.
Welcome to Your Healthy Kitchen. I'm your host, Rita Carey Rubin. Today, we're going to cook up some roots, which I think are some of the most underappreciated plant foods out there. Other veggies like cauliflower, kale, and broccoli, and even Brussels sprouts have had their day in the sun. But roots like turnips, parsnips, rutabagas, beets, and even carrots and some types of potatoes just don't get the attention they deserve. So when you know what varieties to look for, roots truly are some of nature's most nutrient-packed, economical, delicious, and versatile foods. So here are some of the most nutritious, fabulously delicious, and sometimes strangest looking roots that you can find in supermarkets around town and at the Prescott Farmers Market, especially in the winter. And I'd like to thank Corey and Shanti Raid out at Whipstone Farm for providing all of these beautiful veggies for us today. Thanks, guys. So beets. Beets are really relatively low calorie, only about 58 calories per cup. They're really high in fiber. They're packed with folate, a really important B vitamin. They're relatively low in carbohydrates, and actually they have been shown to lower blood pressure and increase oxygen delivery throughout the body, especially to the muscles and the heart. Turnips, really super low calorie, only about 36 calories per cup. They're also very low in carbs and packed with vitamin C. Potatoes really get a lot of bad press, and not all of it is completely undeserved, but there are actually some really nutritious potatoes out there. So we have some purple, red, or even red-skinned spuds that have more phytonutrients and less sugar than your basic russet or Idaho potato. And you know, most people with diabetes find these types of potatoes don't raise blood sugar levels like a russet does. And here's a cool tip for you. Any kind of potato that's cooked and then chilled or even cooled to room temperature will raise blood sugar levels a lot less than one eaten hot out of the oven. So carrots, if you have diabetes, you've probably been told not to eat carrots along with other root vegetables. However, the carbohydrate in carrots is actually quite low, and although some of that carbohydrate is in a sugar-like form, for many people, carrots don't raise blood sugar levels enough to worry about. In fact, your basic orange carrot is really packed with fiber and vitamin A and a host of phytonutrients. But more colorful carrots, like purple and orange or purple and yellow, have even more to offer. So look for those at the farmer's market and save the tops. We'll be making some pesto from these guys later. Sweet potatoes. So the sweet potatoes and yams that we buy in this country are all technically sweet potatoes. So they all come from the same family. It's actually the morning glory family. Some are darker in color, some are lighter, but the darker the color, the more nutrients there are. Although all sweets are good sources of fiber, B vitamins, and calcium. And I have saved my favorites for last, the underdogs of roots, parsnips, rutabagas, and celery root. So parsnips, these are really the most beautiful parsnips I've ever seen. And they've been around since Roman times, and they actually used to be the major starchy crop in colonial America until the potato took over. They have a really unique flavor. It's somewhat carrot-like and sweet, and they're really perfect for roasting. Parsnips are also a great source of that important B vitamin, folate. Also have a lot of fiber and vitamin C. Rutabagas. So rutabagas look like turnips, but they have a creamier color to them. And if you want a good substitute for potatoes, these are your guys. They contain half the calories and carbohydrate, 4 times the fiber, and much more calcium, vitamin C, and B vitamins than any kind of spud. And celery root. Celery root is just what it sounds like. It's the root of the celery plant. And it's used very often in Europe and Scandinavia. And it's well known in French cuisine, but we really don't use much of this nutrient-packed root here. So when I buy celery root in the supermarket, someone always asks me what it is and how it's used. And celery root is really nutritious. It contains a ton of fiber, magnesium, vitamin C, and even iron. And it's also a low-calorie root with only 42 calories per cup. And it could be used anytime you want to use a potato. So these are just some of the roots you'll find in the local markets and the farmers market. And you'll find all of this interesting information plus tips on buying and storing roots at yrmc.org. Just click on Health Connect and follow the link to your healthy kitchen. So let's start cooking. So we're going to make a roasted root soup. And really, you can use any type of root for our roasted root soup. They all work except for maybe beets. Beets, I think the color and the flavor of the beets probably wouldn't go really well with this soup. But we're going to use, today we'll use some of our parsnips, we'll use carrots, and rutabagas and celery root to make our soup. And when you roast veggies, they really develop this caramelized and really nice sweet flavor. It makes the soup delicious. But before we roast our veggies, we'll get some stuff ready for a stock. And as you know, when I make soup at home, I always make my own stock, simply because it's so easy to make, and you can vary the flavor of the stock and add as much or as little salt as you want, so you can really control the sodium content as well. And it's just super easy. So while you're preparing your veggies for your soup, your stock can be cooking away. So just a basic stock recipe today. I've got 4 stalks of celery, and I'm slicing them fairly thin. And then I'll even throw the leaves in there. And remember, when you slice your vegetables thinly for your stock, more of the flavor of the vegetable gets into the water, also more of the nutrients will get into the stock. We'll also throw in some garlic, and it's really easy. I just throw the whole clove of garlic in. I just crush it first and throw it in, skin and all. So see how quick it is to make your own stock. And I'll also chop an onion, and just like the other veggies, chop your onion on the thin side. And I even include in my stock the skin of the onion. The skin is a super concentrated source of a really powerful antioxidant called quercetin. So when you put that skin into your stock, a lot of that antioxidant finds its way into your soup. So we've got some onions, some garlic. We'll do a few carrots here. About 4 or 5 if they're little like this. Carrots, if they're older, can have a little bit of a bitter flavor if they're unpeeled. These are super fresh baby carrots, straight from the farm. They were picked yesterday. So I don't bother to peel these guys. They're just really nice and sweet. So again, nothing fancy, just chop them up. And then some basic seasonings for stock include some bay leaves. So I'll put a few bay leaves in, especially if they're small. And some peppercorns. And if you'd like, you can pick about a teaspoon of peppercorns, and using the side of your knife, crush them a little bit. Because remember, we're making soup, we're making stock, we're flavoring water. So anything that you can do to increase the flavor that's going into the water will help. And I usually add about, half a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon of salt, depending on the size of the pot of stock that I make. So to make the stock, we'll just put this in a soup pot, add about 10 cups of water, bring it to a boil, and then turn it down to a simmer and let it simmer for 30 or 45 minutes until it starts to smell good and you can taste the flavor of the veggies in your stock. So I'll set that aside. Okay, so let's roast some roots. So I have some started here already. I have some carrots and some parsnips chopped up. But let me chop up another parsnip because I'd like to show you how to do it. Parsnips are a little tricky. So I usually peel the parsnips. These are really fresh, and this, it's a really looks like a really thin skin. So sort of like the carrots, if that parsnip looks really fresh, then you probably don't have to peel it. And parsnips contain actually a pretty woody center core. It can be really tough to eat and not very pleasant. So I usually cut the parsnip around the core. And you can really feel it when you're cutting into it. You know where that core is. It really resists the knife. So I usually throw that away and just dice it up. So we'll cut our parsnip into lengths and then dice it, about a half inch dice, and toss it in the bowl with our carrots and our other parsnips. So if you've never tasted parsnips, it's really hard to describe the flavor. It smells, right now when I'm cutting it, it smells a lot like a carrot. It tastes a lot like a carrot, but different. It's hard to describe. It has a nice sweet flavor, and that sweet flavor definitely comes out when you roast it. Okay, so we've got parsnips and carrots to roast, and now let's tackle this guy, so the rutabaga. Rutabagas actually have a pretty thick skin, and sometimes they're coated with a little bit of wax because they can dry out pretty easily in storage. So I always peel a rutabaga. So do so. I cut off the top and flip it over, and then I just take my knife and just run it around the skin. The skin's probably about a 1/4 inch thick on this guy. And then just really treat it just like a potato. Little dice just like a potato. So I'll just cut the rutabaga into some slabs like that. It is a bit of a workout. And then cut this guy into lengths, and then again into those 1/2 inch dice. So yeah, you get a little exercise in the kitchen when you work with roots. So cut them into lengths, and then cut those lengths into a 1/2 inch dice. And rutabagas are a cross between, from what I read, a turnip and a wild cabbage, though I don't know what a wild cabbage actually looks like. But you can smell, it has a little cabbagey smell and a little turnipy smell, so you can really see that blend in the rutabagas. All right, one more veggie for our roast. This guy, so celery root. As you can see, you definitely want to peel your celery root. It's pretty gnarly looking. And just like the rutabaga, we'll cut off one side. So it's nice to have something stable. And just cut off the sides. So celery root, as I'm cutting it, it smells like celery. So it's really the root, the bulb of the plant. And it definitely has a celery-like flavor, but a little bit sweeter. So it's sort of reminiscent of celery and potato, I think, together. And like I said earlier, it's used in Europe quite a lot. Pretty classic vegetable in French salads, just grated celery root. It's also used. You can use it with potatoes in a creamy soup, and it's a little softer than the rutabaga, so it's actually a little bit easier to cut. And yeah, it also roasts just wonderfully. It's just a great root veggie. So really, you want for this soup recipe, you want about 5, maybe 6 cups of root vegetables. Really enough to fill a sheet pan, which we'll do here in a second. So we've got our roots. And before we roast them, we'll add a little bit of olive oil, about a tablespoon of olive oil. Maybe 2, depends on how many roots you have in there. Just really a pinch of salt. And a little bit of black or white pepper. And then a little bit unusual seasonings. We'll add a little bit of allspice. Some sweet, a little bit of a sweet flavor will really accentuate the sweet flavor of the roasted roots. And you don't need a lot. This is pretty strong spice. We'll put in about a 1/4 teaspoon. And I'll also add a little bit of nutmeg. So you could use nutmeg that's already ground, but if you buy fresh nutmeg or the whole nutmeg, and just use a zester or a grater, the nutmeg flavor is a lot stronger, a lot nicer. So there we go. So simply toss your roots with the olive oil and the spices. And then we'll just spread them out on a baking sheet. I've lined this one with parchment paper because it just makes cleanup that much easier. So as you can see, that's about what we needed to fill up the sheet pan. And then we'll pop these guys in the oven and bake them at about 350 degrees for 20 to 30 minutes. Depending on how big you cut the veggies, they'll take a little bit longer to roast if they're cut a little bit larger. And what they'll look like when they come out is this. So they should develop a really nice kind of toasty color and be really pretty much done. We will be adding to these to a soup and cooking them a little bit more, but you really want them to be pretty much done in the oven. So to finish our soup, I've got some olive oil heating here in my pan, and I will add some thinly sliced leeks. So leeks are similar to onions. But they have a milder flavor, I think, a sweeter flavor that goes really well with this soup. You could just use an onion if you don't have a leek. The leeks also give the soup a little bit this really pretty little green, these little flecks of green that are nice. So you can use some of the white or all of the white of part of the leek and just a little bit of the green. And I'll throw this in our pot. And let that saute for a minute. Need to turn the heat up a little bit. There we go. So sort of a medium-high heat. I'm just going to add a pinch of salt. I can hear it sizzle. And also, one more thing to add to our soup is some chopped fresh sage. So this is some sage I pulled out of my garden. So it adds a nice counterpart to the sweet flavors of the root vegetables. So we'll let this cook a little bit. And while that's cooking, let's talk about carrot top pesto. So yeah, you can make pesto really out of anything. So anything that's green and herbaceous, and doesn't always have to contain basil. And so for our pesto, we'll be just using some carrot tops and a little bit of Parmesan cheese and walnuts and some garlic and olive oil. And that's all we need. Before I make that, since these leeks are cooking pretty well, I want to put the soup together for you. So I'll add those beautiful roasted roots. Stir them around a little bit. I'll also add a little bit of lemon. The lemon adds a real nice brightness to the soup because, you know, roots are sweet and kind of earthy. So it's nice to add a little bright spot like citrus to the soup, and it pulls out all the other flavors of the soup. And then we'll add our stock. So this is what your stock would look like after you made it. So that 10 cups of water and all those veggies produces about 7 cups of prepared stock. And I'll crank up the heat a little bit more. And what you do is bring the soup to a boil and then bring it down to a simmer. And let it simmer for 10-15 minutes again, just to blend the flavors and bring everything together. Okay, carrot top pesto. So we've got carrot tops. So first we're going to throw in the blender here, the food processor, just a clove of garlic, and you can adjust the amount of garlic that you want in your pesto depending on how garlicky you like it. I've got about 1/3 of a cup of chopped walnuts, about the same amount of some Parmesan cheese, and I'll just blend this up for a second. So the nuts and the garlic and the cheese are all ground up relatively fine. And we'll just throw in some carrot tops. So this is not probably not a full all of the carrot tops from a full bunch of carrots. There's about 2 cups of carrot tops here, kind of lightly packed. I just rinsed them off and dried them, so we'll blend these. When everything looks pretty evenly blended, just add some olive oil. Usually this takes about a half a cup of olive oil. You could add more or less, really depending on how thick or liquidy you want your pesto. Looks like pesto. So you could also taste this if you need to add salt or pepper or sometimes a little bit of lemon juice. That goes really well. It also brings out the flavor. And you know, I resisted making carrot top pesto for a long time because I didn't think it would taste very good, and this is so incredibly delicious. And really a flavor that I can't really describe. It doesn't taste like basil, but it's wonderful. So use the pesto on your roasted roots. You could use it on pasta. It would be great with a little bit of chicken or fish. There's all sorts of uses, just like any other pesto. So it looks like our soup needs to cook a little bit more, but to serve your soup, what I like to do is to serve the soup topped with a little bit of chopped tomato, because the chopped tomato adds a little bit of a little more acid to the soup and really helps to balance out those sweet flavors. So remember, roots can be a satisfying and nutritious part of your diet. And if you know what to look for and to buy, root vegetables can be a healthy source of carbohydrate, fiber, and those vitally important vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. In fact, you know, I've often helped people lose weight and actually lower their blood sugars by adding healthy root-based carbohydrates to their diet while cutting out some or all of their grain and flour-based high-carb foods. So we'll be creating lots of delicious dishes with roots in the future. But for now, look for our roasted root soup recipe and the recipe for carrot top pesto at yrmc.org. Just click on Health Connect and follow the link to your healthy kitchen. In the meantime, we'll be rooting for you. See you next time.